After 15 years, the alien warrior saluted her human captain once more. Asterisk, the space station Orion's watch floated quietly in the dark. It was the farthest human station from Earth, close to the edge of known space. The wide windows showed only blackness and distant stars. Most days, nothing happened here. But tonight, something was different. Zyra, an alien warrior from the planet Sereth, was walking down the long steel corridor. Her silver skin shone under the dim lights. She had been on guard duty for hours, and her mind was half asleep. Then, her communicator buzzed. Docking Bay 2, incoming ship, a human voice said. No ID code. No record in the system. Zyra stopped walking. An unregistered ship. Out here, that was rare. The last time something like this happened was many years ago during the Orion Wars. She started walking faster, her boots clicking on the metal floor. Other crew members passed by, whispering. I heard it's a ghost ship, one said. No, they say it's him, another replied. Zyra's heart beat faster. Him, could it be? No, that was impossible. The corridors opened into the wide docking bay. Bright lights glowed over the empty landing area. The air was still, except for the sound of the station's life support systems. Then, the small ship appeared, sliding in through the force field gates. Its metal surface was scratched and burned. One of its engines sparked weakly. It looked like it had survived a war. Or worse, the ship landed slowly, almost painfully, as if it might fall apart at any second. The docking clamps locked it into place. For a moment, nothing happened. Zyra stood at the front of the waiting crew. Her golden eyes did not blink. Her hands tightened around the hilt of her sword. She was ready for anything. With a hiss, the airlock door began to open. Steam spilled out, hiding whoever was inside. Then, a figure stepped forward. It was a man. He was tall, but his shoulders were heavy with years. His once dark hair was now almost all gray. His uniform, once proud and clean, was torn in several places. A deep scar cut across his left cheek. Zyra felt the world slow down. She knew that face. She had memorized it 15 years ago. The day he disappeared, Captain John Hayes. The man who had led her into battle. The man who had saved her life more than once. The man she thought was dead. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was heavy with the weight of the years. Then Zyra dropped to one knee. She placed her right fist over her heart, the warrior's salute of her people. Her voice was soft, almost breaking. After 15 years, Captain, it is an honor to serve you again. John looked at her for a long moment. His eyes were tired, not just from age, but from something darker. There was pain in them, and shadows of things she could not understand. It's good to see you, Zyra, he said quietly. But his voice held no joy. The crew around them began to whisper again. Some were shocked. Some looked afraid. The station commander, a short man with sharp eyes, stepped forward. Captain Hayes, he said, you were declared lost beyond the rim. Where have you been? John's gaze moved from Zyra to the commander. He seemed to hesitate. Then he spoke. I was beyond the rim, he said, but I wasn't alone. The way he said it made Zyra's skin prickle. She had fought many battles, faced many enemies, but she had never heard a voice like that. It was the voice of someone who had seen something worse than death. John took a slow step forward. The Shadow Armada is real, he said. They are coming. And if we are not ready, they will burn everything. Earth, Sereth, all of it. The commander frowned. The Shadow Armada is a myth. Old war stories. There is no proof. John's jaw tightened. I saw the proof, he said. I fought them. And I barely escaped with my life. Zyra felt a coldness spread through her chest. She remembered old stories told by her elders, about a dark fleet that came from the empty void, swallowing worlds whole. But those were just stories, weren't they? John looked at her again. Zyra, he said, I need your help. I can't trust anyone else. Her answer was instant. You have it, Captain. Always. But even as she spoke, Zyra knew something was wrong. John was here. Yes, but the man she remembered from 15 years ago was not the man standing before her now. Something had changed him. Something had followed him, and whatever it was, it might already be here. Asterisk. The command room of Orion's watch was bright, cold, and full of voices. Screens covered the walls, showing the blackness of space and the silver curve of the station. Officers stood around a long table, looking at the man who had just returned from the dead. Captain John Hayes stood straight, but his eyes were heavy. Zyra stood beside him, her tall frame towering over most of the humans in the room. Her hand rested on the hilt of her sword. Not because she expected danger, but because old instincts told her danger was always near. The station commander, Varric, tapped the table. "Captain Hayes, you disappeared 15 years ago," Varric said. "No signals, no ship logs. We found nothing. And now you come back." Speaking of a myth, John didn't flinch. "The Shadow Armada is no myth," he said. "They are real, and they are coming." Varric crossed his arms. "Stories told to scare cadets. A dark fleet hiding in the void, feeding on planets. Ridiculous." Zyra's golden eyes narrowed. She had heard the same stories from her own people. They were told around campfires, with low voices, like curses not meant to be spoken aloud. But John's voice. It wasn't the voice of a man telling a story. It was the voice of a man giving a warning. "I was taken beyond the rim," John said slowly. "Past every charted star. Past the last beacon. Out there, the light of known space dies. There's only the dark." The room grew quieter. Even the hum of the life support systems seemed softer. "They found me," he continued. "Ships without lights, without heat. They moved like shadows in water. No radio, no signal, nothing. And when they spoke," he stopped. For a moment, his eyes drifted far away, as if he was back in that place. Zyra leaned closer. "When they spoke, what, Captain?" she asked. John looked at her. "They didn't use words," he said. "They used memories. My own memories. My own voice. They crawled inside my head and turned my thoughts into their weapons." Some officers exchanged uneasy looks. One muttered, "He's been in the dark too long." But Zyra believed him. She could feel it, the weight of truth in his voice. "They aren't just coming for our worlds," John went on. "They're coming for our minds. Once they take your thoughts, they can make you their soldier. You'll fight for them, against your own people." Varric shook his head. "This is madness. You have no proof." John took a deep breath. "Proof is coming," he said. "They followed me back." The words hit Zyra like a blade. She turned sharply toward him. "Followed you?" "Here." John nodded once. "I tried to lose them. I used asteroid fields. I cut my ship's beacon. I drifted for weeks. But they are hunters. And I was the bait." Varric slammed his hand on the table. "If what you say is true, you've put the entire station at risk." John's voice rose for the first time. "If what I say is true, this station is already dead, unless we act now." The command room went silent. Only Zyra spoke. "What do you need, Captain?" John turned to her. "I need the Eclipse," he said. "My old warship. I left her hidden in an asteroid dock before I crossed the rim. She's the only ship fast enough and strong enough to fight them." Varric frowned. "The Eclipse is a relic. Barely spaceworthy." John almost smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. "Then it's just like me." Zyra straightened. "When do we leave?" The commander stepped forward. "You're not taking a station ship without my approval." John met his eyes. "I'm not asking for your ship. I'm taking mine. If anyone wants to live through the next month, they'll follow me." Before Varric could answer, the lights flickered. Once. Twice. The room fell into darkness for 2 long seconds. When the lights came back, a faint alarm began to hum in the background. A young officer at one of the screens looked pale. "Commander, we've got movement," the officer said. "No signal, no beacon. Just shapes. Dozens of them. They're not on the registry." John didn't look at the screen. He didn't need to. "They're here," he said quietly. "They always arrive before the fear fades." The alarms grew louder. Red lights flashed along the walls. Varric began barking orders. But half the room was already looking to John instead. Zyra reached for her sword. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned with fire. "Then we fight," she said. John shook his head. "No, not yet. Fighting them head-on is suicide." "Then what?" she asked. "We disappear," John said. "Just like I did before. Only this time, we take the fight to them, before they take everything from us." Zyra didn't hesitate. She stepped beside him, ready to follow. Whatever these shadows were, whatever dark place he had been, she would go there too. The captain had returned. And with him, so had the war. The docking bay shook, as another low alarm rolled through the station. The faint red lights painted the steel walls in the color of danger. People moved quickly now, soldiers running to their posts, engineers sealing bulkhead doors, officers shouting into headsets. But Zyra's eyes stayed on the man walking ahead of her, Captain John Hayes. She could hardly believe he was real after all these years. Every step she took behind him felt like walking in a dream. But this dream smelled of oil, gunpowder, and fear. They moved toward the hangar, away from the main command center. John didn't speak. His eyes scanned the shadows, as if every corner could hide an enemy. Zaira knew that look. She had seen it once before. 15 years ago. Flashback to 15 years earlier. The battlefield was chaos. Bright green plasma bolts cut through the black sky. The ground was covered in smoking wreckage. Human tanks burning alongside alien war machines. Zaira, then much younger, fought with her blade in the ruins of a human outpost. She had been trapped, surrounded by enemy soldiers. Her weapon was slick with blood, her lungs burned with smoke, and her legs felt like stone. She had been ready to die. Then the human captain appeared. John Hayes, not in the safety of a command ship, but right there in the middle of the fight. He moved fast for a human, firing his rifle with perfect aim, throwing grenades into enemy cover. When his weapon ran dry, he used a steel pipe, like a sword. He fought his way to her side, grabbed her by the arm, and dragged her toward the evac shuttle. "Move, soldier," he had shouted over the roar of battle. "I don't leave my people behind." She had sworn her oath to him that day, an oath that had never broken, not even when the galaxy said he was gone. Present day, they reached a side hangar where smaller scout ships were kept. The hum of the alarms felt louder here. Through the high windows, Zaira could see black shapes drifting at the edge of the station's sensor range. "They're just watching," she said quietly. "Yes," John replied. "They want fear too. Settle in first. Once fear grows, they move." Zaira glanced at him. "What exactly are they?" John paused by a rack of weapons and picked up a compact rifle. He checked the charge and tossed a second one to her. "They're not ships as we understand them," he said. "They're alive in some way. More like predators than machines. They study you before they strike. And when they strike, it's fast." Before Zaira could reply, the station's lights dimmed for a heartbeat, then returned. Over the intercom, Commander Varick's voice barked. "All units, unidentified drones, have breached the outer defense ring. All pilots." Scrambles felt her muscles tense. "They've started." John nodded once. "We need to move. The Eclipse is hidden in Dark Theta, on the far side of the asteroid belt. We can't reach her if the hangar gets locked down." They started moving toward the nearest patrol craft. But before they could reach it, the far wall of the hangar exploded inward. Metal screamed as a hole ripped open, spilling smoke and twisted steel. Through the breach floated something that made Zaira's skin crawl. A drone, black and slick, its surface shifting like liquid metal. It had no clear shape, only an impression of edges and points, like a shadow pretending to be solid. It moved without sound. No thrusters, no lights, just a silent glide. Its surface shimmered faintly, and for a moment, Zaira thought she saw her own face in it. Then it attacked. The drone darted forward faster than her eyes could track. A soldier nearby didn't even have time to raise his weapon before the thing struck, slicing through his armor with a single blow. Zaira's sword was in her hand before she thought. She lunged, her blade striking the black surface. It cut, but not cleanly. The drone's body shifted around the blade like water parting around a rock. John's rifle cracked, sending a burst of blue plasma into the thing. It recoiled, but didn't fall. "They're testing us," John said grimly. "They're not here to win yet, just to learn how we fight." More drones slipped through the breach. 3, 6, 10, each moved differently, some sliding across the floor like shadows under a door, others darting in the air like insects. The hangar became chaos. Soldiers fired, drones struck, sparks and smoke filled the air. Zaira moved with precision, cutting down one drone, then another, each blow fueled by the old oath she had sworn. But for every drone they destroyed, 2 more entered. John fired another burst, then grabbed Zaira's arm. "Enough, we leave now." They broke away from the fight, sprinting toward the nearest patrol craft. John slammed the hatch shut as Zaira jumped in after him. The ship's engines roared to life. Through the cockpit window, Zaira saw the hangar fading behind them, a storm of shadows swallowing the place where she had just stood. As they shot into open space, John's voice was calm but hard. "They'll keep coming, and next time, they'll be ready for us." Zaira gripped her sword tighter. "Then we'll be ready for them, Captain." But deep inside, she wondered if readiness would be enough, because she had seen something in that first drone's surface, a reflection that wasn't hers. It was John's face, but younger, and smiling. The patrol craft slipped through the black of space. its small engines leaving only a faint blue trail. Zaira sat in the co-pilot seat, her sword still across her knees. Her golden eyes scanned the empty stars, but her mind kept replaying the fight in the hangar. The way those drones moved, the strange shimmer of their skin, the reflection she had seen. John Hayes sat in the pilot's chair, silent, hands steady on the controls. He looked older than he had in the hangar, as if every kilometer they traveled added another year to his face. Finally, Zaira broke the silence. Doc Theta, how far? John glanced at the screen. 6 hours, if we take the direct route. But we can't, they'll be watching it. They followed you from beyond the rim, she said. They'll guess you're heading to your ship. John nodded. That's why we need a crew first. The Eclipse won't fly on just the two of us. Zaira turned toward him. Where do we find them? You've been gone 15 years. Most of your people will be dead or retired. John finished for her. He didn't sound sad, just certain. But I know a few who might still answer my call. They stopped first at a mining outpost carved into the side of a dead moon. It was an ugly place. Rusting platforms, the air thick with the smell of fuel. The locals barely looked up as the patrol craft landed. John led Zaira through the narrow tunnels until they reached a small bar. Dim yellow lights flickered above rows of dented tables. Behind the counter stood a heavy-set man with a mechanical arm. He looked up. For a moment, there was no sign of recognition. Then, his eyes widened. John Hayes, he said, his voice low. I was at your funeral. John almost smiled. Guess you didn't dig the hole deep enough. McCann's metal fingers drummed on the counter. I heard you went beyond the rim. Heard you didn't come back. I didn't. Not until now. And I need your help. John said. Mick leaned forward. This about those stories. The Shadow, Armada. Zaira watched closely. This man's tone wasn't mocking. It was wary, like someone who had already heard whispers. They're real, John said, and they're coming. I need the Eclipse running, and you're still the best engineer I know. McCann let out a slow breath. You'll need more than me. You'll need gunners, pilots, ACOMS officer. I'll take whoever you can find that's loyal. John interrupted. McCann's eyes shifted to Zaira. She loyal? I swore an oath, Zaira said simply. McCann nodded once. Then I'm in. Let me make a few calls. By the time they left the outpost, 2 more names were confirmed. Tessa Vaughn, a sharp-eyed pilot who once flew recon for the Union fleet. Dane Red, a quiet but deadly gunner who preferred to speak with his cannons. John plotted their course to pick them up. The patrol craft became a moving ghost, slipping between asteroid shadows, cutting power to avoid scans. Every stop was the same. Quiet conversations in dark corners. Old faces, lit by surprise and something like fear. Some refused. Some asked too many questions. But enough said yes. After 3 days of careful travel, the crew was assembled. 7 in total. John, Zaira, McCann, Tessa, Dane, and 2 younger recruits McCann vouched for. They sat in the cramped hold of the patrol craft as John stood before them. You've all heard the name, he said. The Shadow Armada. Maybe you thought it was a story. I thought so too, once. But I've seen them. I fought them. And now they're here. Tessa crossed her arms. Why us? The Union has ships. Fleets. They don't believe. John said simply. And belief is the first weapon. You can't fight what you won't admit exists. McCann grunted. Where exactly are we going? John looked out the small window at the starfield. To the Eclipse. She's hidden in Dock Theta. If she's still in one piece, she's the only ship that can hit them before they hit us. Dane's deep voice spoke for the first time. And if she's not in one piece, John's eyes hardened. Then we put her back together. Or we die trying. As the patrol craft approached the asteroid belt, Zaira felt her chest tighten. The rocks were huge, drifting in slow orbits, their shadows deep and cold. Some were cracked open, revealing glittering metal veins from old mining work. Others were untouched, perfect places for something to hide. Tessa took the co-pilot seat and helped John weave the craft through the belt. Once, a massive chunk of stone passed so close it scraped the hull. Another time, Zaira thought she saw movement between 2 rocks. But when she looked again, there was only emptiness. Finally, a shape appeared on the scanner. Dock Theta. It was carved into the side of an asteroid, the size of a small moon. The massive blast doors were shut, covered in a thin layer of ice. They looked like they hadn't been opened in years. John slowed the patrol craft and sent a coded pulse from the console. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, with a groan that echoed even in the vacuum, the blast doors began to open. Inside was darkness. And then, slowly, the lights came on, revealing the shape of a ship that filled almost the entire dock. The Eclipse. Even under layers of dust and ice, Zyra could see her beauty. A predator's shape. Built for speed and power. Sleeping. But not dead. John's voice was almost a whisper. Home. But Zyra noticed something else. Faint scorch marks across the hull. Patterns she had seen before. Patterns like the skin of the shadow drones. The Eclipse sat in the cold dock, like a sleeping beast. Her long dark hull was covered in dust and frost. But beneath the surface, Zyra could feel something. The quiet weight of a warship that had seen battles no one dared remember. The new crew stepped off the patrol craft and onto the dock floor. Their voices echoed in the huge, empty space. McCann whistled low. She's still here. I didn't think she'd survive this long. She survived worse, John Hayes said, walking forward until his hand touched the cold metal of the hull. His fingers lingered there, like he was greeting an old friend. The repairs began inside. The Eclipse was dark and silent. The corridors smelled of stale air and rust. Old dust floated in the beams of their helmet lights. Life support's dead, McCann muttered, checking a wall panel. Engines are cold. And the power core. Well, it's a miracle it hasn't collapsed. Then fix it, John said. Bring her back. For the next 2 days, the crew worked without rest. McCann and his team tore into the engine bay, pulling out broken parts and replacing them with spares from the dock. Tessa crawled through the fighter launch tubes, clearing debris and ice. Dane tested the main guns. Half were jammed, and one barrel was bent from some long-ago impact. Zyra focused on the bridge. The captain's chair was covered in dust. Screens and controls sat dead, their glass cracked in places. She wiped one console clean and saw faint scorch marks, the same pattern she had seen on the shadow drones. She didn't mention it. Not yet. Shadows in the dock on the third night. Zyra woke in her small cabin aboard the Eclipse. She had heard something, a soft scrape, like metal on metal. She reached for her sword and stepped into the corridor. The ship was silent except for the faint hum of the repair generators. Her golden eyes scanned the shadows. Nothing moved. Then she saw it, a faint shimmer, at the far end of the corridor. It looked like heat rising from the floor, even though the air was cold. She took a step forward, and the shimmer slid away. Into the dock. She chased it, turning down one corridor after another, until she reached the engine bay. McCann was there, tightening a bolt. You see something? He asked. Zyra hesitated. Maybe. Or maybe I've been staring into too much darkness. McCann gave her a grim smile. Out here, the darkness stares back. The Eclipse lives again by the end of the week. The Eclipse breathed again. The lights returned, dim at first, then brighter. The engines rumbled to life, deep and steady. Life support systems pumped fresh air into the corridors, pushing out the stale cold. On the bridge, John sat in his chair for the first time in 15 years. Zyra stood beside him, watching the screens light up one by one. She flies again, Tessa said from the pilot's station. Not smooth yet, but she move. Then we move, John said. Set a course beyond the belt. Into the uncharted. Into the black. The massive dock doors opened, revealing the stars beyond. The Eclipse slid forward, her engines glowing faintly. Once clear of the asteroid, Tessa pushed the throttle. The stars blurred. The ship hummed like a living thing. Hours passed. In near silence. No one slept. The deeper they went into uncharted space, the more the familiar star patterns vanished. The darkness outside grew heavier, swallowing even the brightest points of light. Zyra felt it in her bones. The sense that they were leaving safety far behind. The ghosts signaled half a day into the journey. Dane called from the gunnery station. Captain. Picking up something strange. John leaned over the console. A faint signal pulsed on the screen. Not a distress call. Not any Union frequency. It was slow, steady, and wrong. McCann frowned. That's not a radio signal. That's biological. From a ship? Zyra asked. From something, McCann said. But whatever it is, it's moving toward us. The bridge fell silent. The pulse grew stronger, filling the speakers with a low, almost human hum. Zyra didn't like the sound. It felt like it was pressing against her thoughts. Contact, shut it off, John ordered. Tessa reached for the controls, but froze. Her hands stopped halfway, trembling. Tessa? John asked sharply. Her voice was quiet, almost like she was speaking in a dream. It's calling me. Zyra moved fast, grabbing Tessa's wrist and yanking her back. The hum stopped the instant. Her hand left the controls. John's face was grim. They're testing us again. Seeing if they can slip in without a fight. McCann cursed under his breath. If that's a test, I don't want to see the real thing. The edge of the map. Few hours later, the last known star vanished from their charts. The eclipse had crossed the edge, past the last beacon, into the dark John had spoken of. On the main screen, the black seemed thicker here, as if the void itself was alive. Small movements flickered at the edges of vision, but when Zyra looked directly, they were gone. John stood from his chair. This is their hunting ground. And if we're lucky, we'll find them before they find us. Zyra's hand tightened on her sword. She wasn't sure if luck was something they still had. The eclipse cut back into known space, like a predator returning to its hunting grounds. Her dark hull gleamed faintly against the light of the distant star. For the first time in days, Zyra saw familiar constellations, but Orion's watch wasn't as she had left it. Smoke rose from the station's outer hull. Parts of its silver plating were blackened and cracked. The defense turrets, usually lined up like soldiers, were broken in places. Small Union frigates floated nearby, some with fire still licking their decks. On the bridge, McCann leaned over the sensor screen. Multiple heat signatures. Too many. Drones. Maybe hundreds. They've already breached the outer ring. John Hayes stood tall in the captain's chair. They didn't wait for us to return, he said. They came early. Enemy in sight. Main screen flickered as Tessa zoomed in on the station's perimeter. Black shapes swarmed through the debris like insects over a corpse. They moved with that same unnatural silence Zyra remembered from the dock. A low, cold feeling spread through her chest. The shadows weren't hiding now. They were feeding. Dane's voice came from the gunnery station. Captain, main cannons are online. Permission to fire. John shook his head. Not yet. We're going in close. If we open fire too far out, they'll scatter, and some will get inside the station. McCann turned sharply. Inside, you mean? They want the people, John said flatly. Ships are just walls. Mines are what they're after. The plan. John brought up a tactical map. The station was under attack on 3 sides. The shadows had already breached the maintenance docks. We'll cut across here, John said, tracing a line through the densest swarm. The clips will take the brunt. Zyra, you lead a boarding team to Dock 3 and clear the breach. McCann, keep the engines running hot. We might need to jump in a heartbeat. Zyra nodded. She didn't hesitate. Not when the captain gave an order. First strike. The eclipse roared into the swarm. Dane opened fire, the main cannons thundering through the vacuum. Blue plasma bursts tore into the black shapes, burning holes in the swarm. For a moment, the shadows shifted back, scattering like a disturbed nest. Then they came together again, even thicker than before. Some latched onto the eclipse's hull, their limbs piercing the armor. The ship shook with the impacts. Cut them off, John barked. Secondary guns along the hull came to life, spitting fire into the creatures clinging to the armor. Zyra felt the deck shudder under her boots. Dock 3, a small boarding craft shot out from the eclipse, weaving through debris toward the station. Zyra stood at the front, sword in hand, her boarding team behind her. The moment they landed inside Dock 3, the shadows were there. Not ships this time, but forms shaped like twisted soldiers, their bodies shifting between salad and smoke. First one lunged. Zyra's blade flashed, slicing it clean through. It dissolved into black mist that curled away into the vents. Her team moved like a wall of steel, clearing one corridor after another. Every step was a fight. The shadows seemed to learn with each attack. Their movements sharper, their strikes more precise. On the bridge back aboard the Eclipse, the fight was just as fierce. Tessa threw the ship into hard turns, dodging black projectiles that moved like guided spears. McCann's voice came over the com. Shields are dropping. We can't take much more. John's eyes stayed locked on the screen. Holds up. Not clear yet. Dane cursed as another blast shook the bridge. They're trying to pin us here. The turning point in Dock 3. Zyra's team finally pushed the last of the shadows out through the breach. She hit her com. Captain, Dock 3 is clear. Seal it now. John gave the order. Massive blast doors slammed shut behind them, cutting off the invading swarm. On the main screen, the shadows outside shifted suddenly, pulling away from the station and focusing entirely on the Eclipse. They've marked us, John said. They know who the threat is now. Full power Dane, all guns. Tessa, bring us straight through them, John ordered. The Eclipse charged forward, plasma fire, lighting up the dark. Dozens of shadow forms exploded into mist, but the swarm didn't break. It twisted, forming a wall in their path. "Captain, they're blocking us from the station's heart," McCann warned. "Then we punched through," John said. "This ship was built for war. Let's remind them." The Eclipse's engines screamed as McCann pushed them to maximum. The ship tore through the wall of shadows, guns blazing, leaving a trail of burning fragments in her wake. Temporary victory. By the time they cleared the swarm, the shadows had begun to pull back. Not destroyed, just retreating, like predators, testing prey before the real hunt. On the come, Varric's voice came through, shaken. "Captain Hayes, we owe you the station." "But what was that?" John's reply was cold. "That was just there, hello." Zyra stood beside him on the bridge, her sword still in her hand. She knew this wasn't over. The shadows had seen them, studied them, and now they would adapt. And somewhere out there, in the dark, the real battle was waiting. Asterisk. The Eclipse floated in the silence after the battle. Debris drifted past her dark hull. Pieces of broken drones, shattered station plating, and frozen fragments of things that had never truly been alive. But Zyra knew it wasn't victory. The shadows had left because they chose to. And predators never left without a reason. On the bridge, Captain John Hayes stood over the main display. The map showed the station behind them, and a growing signal ahead. It pulsed like a heartbeat. Slow, steady, coming closer. "That's them," John said quietly. "Their core ship. The mind that links them all." McCann leaned back from the engineering console. "How big are we talking?" John didn't look away from the display. "Bigger than the Eclipse. Maybe bigger than Orion's watch itself." The crew gathered on the bridge. They were tired, bruised, and running low on ammunition, but none of them looked away when John spoke. "This is our chance," he said. "If we destroy that core ship, we break their network. The drones will lose coordination. They'll scatter. Maybe long enough for the Union to prepare. Maybe," McCann said. "And what's the cost?" John's voice was steady. "The cost is this ship. And probably me." Zyra turned sharply. "No, there's another way." John shook his head. "I've seen inside their minds, Zyra. Once I get close, enough to trigger the Eclipse's core detonation, they'll focus on me. You'll have a chance to get clear. You expect me to run while you stay," she said, her voice hard. "I expect you to live," John said. "That was my order then, and it's my order now." They approached the Eclipse, moved through the black, her engines at minimum to avoid detection. The core ship grew larger on the screen, a shape like a living shadow, its surface shifting and folding in on itself. It had no windows, no lights, no obvious weapons. But Zyra could feel its presence pressing against her thoughts. Voices whispered in her head. Not her own, not John's. Strangers, memories that weren't hers. She gripped the hilt of her sword, until the voices faded. The plan in motion when they reached firing range. John gave the orders. "Zyra, take the crew and launch in the patrol craft. Keep your distance until the core ship is gone." Zyra didn't move. "I'm not leaving you." "That's an order," he said. The bridge went silent. Finally, she stepped forward and placed her hand over her heart, the salute of her people. Her voice was low. "Then I will obey, Captain. But I will return for you." John almost smiled. "You always did have a stubborn streak." The final run, the crew evacuated to the patrol craft, leaving John alone on the Eclipse. From her seat in the smaller ship, Zyra watched the warship turn toward the core ship. Its engines flared bright as it accelerated. The shadows reacted instantly. Black shapes swarmed out from the core, latching onto the Eclipse, tearing at her. Armored, but the ship kept moving, cutting through them with cannon fire and burning thrusters. The signal in the patrol craft. McCann's voice broke through the static. "He's broadcasting a signal. Old Union war code. It's a goodbye." Zyra's hands clenched into fists. She stared at the screen, refusing to blink as the Eclipse reached the core ship. The two vessels collided in a storm of light and shadow. For a moment, Zyra thought the darkness would swallow them both whole. Then the Eclipse's core detonated. The explosion lit the void like a newborn star. A shockwave ripped through space, shattering the core ship into 1,000 burning fragments. The swarm froze, then broke apart, drifting without direction. Silence, the light faded, and there was nothing left of the Eclipse but dust. The patrol craft floated in the quiet, its crew staring at the empty space where their ship had been. No one spoke. Zyra kept her eyes on the place where the explosion had been, as if she could still see him there. Her chest felt heavy, but she stood tall. Aftermath weeks later, Orion's watch was repaired enough to hold a memorial. Flags from a dozen worlds hung in the station's great hall. Soldiers, engineers, and civilians stood together, their heads bowed. Zyra wore her ceremonial armor, the blade at her side polished bright. When her turn came to speak, she stepped forward and faced the gathered crowd. Captain John Hayes was human, she said. But he was more than that. He was a leader who saw no difference between human and alien, soldier and civilian. To him, we were all his crew. And he never left his crew behind. She turned toward the viewport, where the stars stretched into forever. Her voice was quieter now, meant for only one man to hear. Until we meet again, Captain, it will always be an honor to serve you. She raised her hand in a final salute. For a moment, she almost thought she saw a familiar figure standing in the reflection, tall, broad-shouldered, smiling faintly, and then it was gone.